Hi, it is my great pleasure to introduce our speaker today, Hailey Hawkins of the Endangered Species Coalition. Hailey is the Southern Rockies field representative for the Endangered Species Coalition, and she does their campaign efforts in Colorado, New Mexico, and Arizona. Previously, Hailey worked with a Colorado-based community group called Boulder Rights of Nature as the strategic research lead for their efforts protecting Boulder County's threatened and endangered mammals. And Hailey, I have to tell you, my favorite endangered Boulder County mammal is the Preble's Meadow jumping mouse. And all the little miceys, thank you for your efforts. So she now has become a member of their board of trustees. And while she was obtaining her master's degree from Naropa in environmental leadership, Hailey nurtured her passion for conservation by exploring the dynamic interconnectedness of all life, both human and non-human, and in really looking at the impact of development on wildlife. So Hailey began her environmental career working for the Southern Alliance for Clean Energy and the Southern Energy Network, putting together their grassroots efforts for renewable energy in the Southeast. She has a BA in communication and a minor in environmental sciences from Mississippi State University. In addition to advocating for wildlife conservation, Hailey's passions include gardening, meditating, hiking, and playing in the park with her canine pals, Kane and Sebastian. Hailey?
Am I on? Am I good? Everything sounds great. Thank you, Valerie, and thank you everybody for having me here today. I'm super excited to talk to you about my favorite thing, animals. But before we get started, I want to tell you a little bit more about me. I am the Southern Rockies field representative for the Endangered Species Coalition. And if you haven't heard of us, we're a national nonprofit whose mission is to stop the human-caused extinction of our nation's most at-risk species. And we do that in a variety of ways. We do that through education, that's why I'm here today. We also do that through engaging with our elected officials, that's federally, state, and locally. And we also do that, you know, where our heart really lies and where we love doing it is with grassroots engagement and community mobilization. Another reason why I wanted to be here with y'all today. And that coalition piece of the Endangered Species Coalition refers to us having about 300 member groups across the country. And those member groups range from other big conservation organizations to outdoor recreation organizations, faith-based communities, businesses, educational institutions, and the list goes on. And we take this big group of diverse stakeholders and we make a loud voice for wildlife and the Endangered Species Act. So it's a little bit more about us and what we do. I'm here because I love wildlife and I love being outside. I hike, I camp, I love rock climbing. I'm just learning to snowboard this season. It has been like crazy. Does anybody snowboard or ski here? Oh my God, it's the hardest, I know. It's like the hardest thing I've ever learned how to do. But so I just love being outside, and that's why I'm here talking to you today and how I got here. So today we're going to talk about habitat connectivity. We're going to talk about what it is, why it's important, who it's important to, spoiler alert, us. And then we're going to talk about what habitat connectivity actually looks like and look at some examples and then see what we can do to help. And this presentation, you know, we don't have a lot of time here today. We have like 20 minutes. But this presentation is meant to be interactive. So there are going to be a couple screens that come up and there'll be questions on it. And I would love it if a handful of people just like shouted out the first thing that popped into their mind. So we're going to start with one of those right now. So what do you value most about the natural places in Colorado, especially in Boulder? Accessibility, recreation opportunities, open space, whoops. Clean? Clean, it is clean, it's beautiful. Seeing wildlife and deer and elk and foxes. Yeah, and you know, all of those things, we get all of those things because we've given our wildlife here the ability to move for the most part. And so we can thank connectivity and wildlife movements for a lot of those things. And also, I wanted to ask everybody this question because this information is really like heady, and it's really intellectual. We're gonna kind of talk about biology and animal behavior sort of, and I wanted to bring this up because I think it's also important that we bring in that appreciation for the outdoor world and our care that we have and the love that we have for that, and try to like bring those together. So please keep that in mind as we're going through the presentation. All right, so habitat connectivity is the ability of wildlife, which includes bugs, fish, plants even, mammals, birds. It's the ability of wildlife to move from one place to another in order to fulfill their roles in the natural world. And wildlife use corridors to move from one area of core habitat to another. And core habitats are large, intact areas with the ecological functions intact and persistent enough to maintain wildlife populations. Now, it's just a really fancy way of saying that everybody's where they're supposed to be and everything's doing what it's supposed to do. And our core habitats are often on public lands because these areas are large and protected, which is another reason to keep our public lands in our public hands and not let them get destroyed by the shutdown. But that's a different presentation. This picture really well describes the three definitions that I just gave you. And when you see patch here, that's going to be synonymous with core habitat. So we have, let me see if I can figure this out. Don't know if you can see that. So we have a patch right here, here, up here, and we have this nice green corridor that's connecting these two core habitats. There's no roads here, there's no houses there, nice and easy for wildlife to move through. Now we have this kind of stepping stone area. And as you can see by the lines, wildlife can still move, but it's gonna be a lot harder. There's probably a road right here, a neighborhood here, maybe a shopping mall there. And so it's possible, but it's not ideal. There's not a lot of resources. It's just a lot harder for wildlife to move. Okay, so roads, fences, houses, shopping malls, they all stand in the way of wildlife movement and cause fragmentation. And habitat loss and fragmentation are the biggest drivers of species decline and extinction worldwide. Many of you might have heard that we're experiencing the 6th mass extinction globally. So this is going to be one of the main causes worldwide. And let's see. So without the ability to move in the wild, species can't disperse. They can't find mates. They can't migrate, and sometimes they can't even find food or water. Also, fragmentation limits wildlife's ability to adapt to climate change. As our climate is warming, wildlife are actually finding it harder to get to more suitable habitat. They literally just can't get there. And connections northward and upward, like those in our backyard and our Boulder Rocky Mountains, they're going to be of extra importance because they'll probably serve as climate refuge for species as our climate continues to change. So to break it down a little bit for you, large mammals, migratory birds, certain types of fish, all have an especially strong need to move across landscapes and waterscapes. So can y'all think of any Colorado wildlife that really needs movement? Deer, elk, owls, yeah. Mountain lions, nailed it. Bear, thank you. Honestly, any animal you would have said would have been right. But thank you, everybody. You did a great job. Even our northern leopard frog here in Boulder, they need corridors and connectivity. Super cool. So I have a couple examples for you here. This is our monarch butterfly. Monarchs every year make the 3,000-mile migration from the United States to Mexico every year, and they need places to stop and collect resources, to mate, to lay their eggs, and that's really far for a butterfly. So they need corridors and ways to do that. Interestingly, in Colorado, our monarchs go west to California. Instead of north to south, they migrate east to west. And you might have seen just last week, there was a headline in a California news outlet, and it said California monarchs have declined by 86%. Here's the thing, y'all. Their monarchs are our monarchs. They go back and forth, so our monarchs have decreased by 86%. So corridors and safe pathways for them to go back and forth is just one thing that they need, but it's one really important thing. All right, next we have the Canada lynx. This is a cool guy. They were reintroduced at the beginning of the century in the San Juan Wilderness in South Colorado, and they very occasionally, probably rarely, they rarely make it up to Boulder, but they do sometimes. And like other big cats, lynx are solitary creatures. When they get old enough to leave their mothers, they disperse and lay claim to different territories, and they're also looking for mates and doing their lynx thing. But a lynx territory can be upwards of 20 square miles. And I want to put that in perspective for you. I bet, let's say your house probably sits on a quarter of an acre or a half of an acre, probably in Boulder anyway. 20 square miles is 13,000 acres. So they need a lot of space to move and to roam, and they need ways to get to those new places. Making sure I'm not forgetting anything. So since wildlife can't move and disperse properly, they often have trouble finding mates from different populations. This decreases the genetic diversity of the local populations of those species. And this can cause a lot of trouble. This can cause inbreeding, disease, and it can also lower that species population's ability to, again, adapt to changing environments. Habitat fragmentation also reduces the resiliency of entire ecosystems. So one example is, if even one species is missing from an ecosystem, that can change everything. And you could look at it like this. If say you don't show up for work and a deadline gets pushed up or a project gets thrown on you, or maybe you get really busy, if you're not there, are your coworkers going to suffer and have to kind of pick up the slack for you? Totally. So this is kind of the same thing in our ecosystems. If our players can't move in and out of the right core habitats and be present when needed, everything's going to suffer. And all of these things compromise ecological integrity, which basically means an ecosystem stops doing what it's meant to do. All right. How important is habitat connectivity for humans? Maybe like really important, not really important, whatever. Nailed it, nailing it. Everybody just, yeah, look at your friends, they're getting it right. Great. Yeah, it's really important. So properly functioning ecosystems clean our air and filter our water for us. They also offer us a sense of peace and freedom through outdoor recreation. And I mean, who needs that to be able to escape the daily stress of, I mean, we got to get outside. That's why we live in Boulder, right? That's why we pay what we do to live here, because it's so beautiful and it's worth it. Also, benefits of habitat connectivity are that it actually curbs diseases. So, like I said, when all the proper players are present and species are able to move in and out of core habitats, you actually see a decrease in diseases like Lyme, which affects humans. You also see a decrease in chronic wasting disease, which affects deer and elk, and which, if you haven't heard, Colorado Parks and Wildlife has come out to say that chronic wasting disease is increasing pretty rapidly here in Colorado. It's a big concern. Some other benefits that we get are waste removal, carbon sequestration, flood mitigation, and the list goes on. But we're like a huge piece of this puzzle, and we get a lot from it. So I also see access to the outdoors and large landscapes as a social and environmental justice issue. So here in Boulder, this has already come up, we are so privileged to be surrounded by over 100,000 acres of open space. And so not only do we get to recreate and have fun on there, that open space also allows our wildlife to move. But not everybody has that privilege. Oftentimes, low-income communities and communities of color are instead surrounded by coal-fired power plants, polluting factories, garbage dumps. But when it really comes down to it, if we can develop in a way that benefits our wildlife and prioritizes wildlife movements, and like in an intentional way, in a smart way, that's going to be good for humans too. So it's kind of funny how like what's good for wildlife is also good for humans. It's really not funny, it's kind of just makes sense. But yeah. So now we're getting into some, now we're getting into some examples. Like habitat connectivity is kind of this big concept and sometimes it's hard to see it. So I wanted to kind of show you some examples of where we have it and also some examples of where we need it. And so who recognizes this place? Yeah, who's driven through here? Who's like done the thing where you hold your breath? Who has successfully done that? Oh, no way. Okay, so this is like 1.5 miles long. So if you're going 60 miles an hour, you've held your breath for 90 seconds. You should be a diver or something. But, so this is all, so as well as being a place to pass some time while you're going down I-70 to go skiing or go to the desert, this is also a really key wildlife corridor. So the Eisenhower Tunnel is actually the one place on I-70 that has a land bridge over it that's not impeded on one side by water, a lane of traffic, or a railroad, which all of those things impede wildlife movements to varying degrees. So this place is instrumental to wildlife movement over I-70. And there actually is some wilderness area up there, which is really great. But our community likes to keep an eye on it because there have been petitions to increase backcountry recreation like snowmobiling, which is so much fun. And this place is special. We need to connect and protect this place. So we also on I-70, we have Vail Pass, which is about 15 miles east of Vail when you're headed west. And this has been an area that's been identified by researchers as a key wildlife linkage. Researchers have suggested 1 overpass and 2 underpasses at this area. And actually one of our member groups, Rocky Mountain Wild, you might have heard of them, they're out of Denver, they were have been instrumental in this project. And I was just told 2 days ago, hot off the presses, that they just secured a contribution of $140,000 from Vail Resorts to start doing preliminary design and a feasibility study. So that's really exciting, and this stuff is moving. My next happy example is on Highway 9, which is south of Kremlin, Colorado. I see some heads shaking. Have y'all seen these before driving that way? Yeah, these are cool, right? Yeah, so there's an 11-mile stretch on Highway 9 that was identified as an area with high wildlife activity, which was being used mostly as deer and elk winter range. And every winter, checking my notes to make sure I get all my numbers right, every winter there was an average of 63 deer and elk collisions, putting humans in danger and putting our wildlife in danger and putting property in danger. So to mitigate this, Colorado Parks and Wildlife, Colorado Department of Transportation, and a bunch of other local stakeholders, this initiative was actually like brought up from the community, came together and built 2 overpasses, 5 underpasses, and 62 wildlife escape ramps. The coolest part to me is that before the project was even done, wildlife were using them, and it's led to a 90% decrease in wildlife vehicle collisions. This is great news. Okay, so this is my favorite part of the presentation. This is where I really start to nerd out a little bit. I'm about to show you a couple maps. Oh, that's my fault. Stop touching it. Sorry, Fred. I'm about to show you a couple maps from the Boulder County Comprehensive Plan. I'm going to show you where wildlife are moving where we live in our home. I was really hoping, okay, you can't see this, I know that, but it's too cool not to include. So we have these purple blotches. Those are going to be our core habitats. Before I get too far ahead of myself, let me orient you. Here's Barker Reservoir in Netherland, Boulder Canyon. Now we're in Boulder. We're probably we're here-ish. So we have these core habitats that have been identified by the county, and we have these purple striped migration corridors. This one's just south of Ned, north of Jamestown. These are used mostly by elk. And the reason that is because elk are really big, and there's a lot of them, and they're easy to track. So it's really easy to see, here are the migration corridors that they're using. But the cool thing about this is if an elk can use a corridor, So can a lot of other animals because they're so big. So bears can use them, mountain lions, wolverines if we ever get them back, ring-tailed cats, all kinds of cool, the list goes. I could just keep listing animals, but it won't. So these are some migration corridors in our backyard. And next we have, again, same map. So we have Barker Reservoir in Nederland, Boulder Canyon, into Boulder, here we are. The dark purple is going to be our environmental conservation areas. So these are areas of fairly low fragmentation. And then we have this dark purple that's outlining our creeks. And creeks and riparian areas are considered super highways for wildlife. There's the resources that they need, and it's easy to move alongside of them because, I mean, we don't build houses in creek beds. So that helps. But then we have these green spotted lines, and these are our overland habitat connectors is what the county calls them. I call them corridors. But so this is gonna be like Settlers Park and the Red Rocks Trail. So we have this like distinct corridor that our wildlife are using right outside of town, like right west of neighborhoods. And I just think that that is so cool. We also have this other one here, like this is Boulder Canyon. So we have this one crossing over Boulder Canyon, which is I actually live at Boulder Canyon. It's a really busy road, and I was just, actually get this. So I locked myself out of my house yesterday, and I had to go to my neighbor's house to use his phone and get some help. And of course we started chatting, and he told me just last year he saw a bear get hit right before our house. He had seen, I think he's been there for 30 years. He'd seen a couple bears get hit in his time, a couple deer. So again, this road can be really dangerous with the snow and the ice, and so people are in danger, wildlife are in danger. But anyway, this is where your wildlife are moving in Boulder County. There's also going to be like corridors within the city, but I don't have those on here. So, how is everybody feeling? Good? I hear some goods. Great. That's awesome. All right. Yeah, I mean, if you're like me, this information is probably like really exciting, right? And then there's also like, not to bum you out, but there's also like an undertone of sadness to this because, you know, the Front Range is super fragmented. And so we are creating some of these issues here to add like societally, right? But there's some things that we can do to help. But before I get into that, I do want to say that habitat connectivity offers us a special challenge because unlike some environmental problems, we can't just plant native plants or recycle to help. We really need our decision makers and our elected officials to implement policies and initiatives that will help on a larger scale, kind of like our Highway 9 case study that we just saw. So I have a few examples of things that you could do today if you wanted. Something you can do right now sitting in your chair is you can text Boulder to 52886 and my organization will shoot you a link and you can sign a petition asking the Boulder City Council to designate wildlife corridors in Boulder. I actually wrote the petition and my card's over there so you can, you know, it's good because I wrote it. Another thing that you can do is volunteer with us and to spread awareness. And honestly, that can be as easy as just going home and talking to your friends and family about what you learned today. Or it can be as detailed as going to a city council meeting and talking to your city council members. Or maybe you're an introvert like me, although you probably wouldn't be able to tell from this presentation, but maybe you're an introvert and you would rather like write a letter to the editor or something like that and submit it to the paper. All of these things would be really, really helpful and great and awesome. And then the last thing, this is a fun thing. Next time you're taking a trip west on I-70 or east for that matter, either direction, you can check out Rocky Mountain Wild's Wild I-70 audio tour. And it's found at this izzy.travel app. Here's the icon. But especially if you have kiddos, it's really cool. You download it and you turn on the app as you're going down I-70 and then you can go to your music or whatever, but it actually pings your GPS location and a 7-minute segment automatically plays and it's educational and tells you cool stuff about that area and cool stuff about the wildlife. I did it and got like super, a little too excited about it in the car and was yelling at my partner, telling him, turn down the music. Anyway, so that's what I got today. Special thanks to these organizations for providing information for this presentation. And looks like we have 5 minutes for questions. I think I nailed it, fellas. All right.
showed the corridors essentially on the west side of town, whatever. But I assume the corridors in eastern Colorado are equally important, right?
Yeah, certainly. So,
So I think my question, you know, with I-25, down or whatever, I mean, how does that, is that just a gate? I mean, that's not happening.
so I-25 is also, okay, so the question is, aren't, in case anybody didn't hear, aren't corridors east to west just as important to north to south? And then, am I capturing you correct?
Corridors on the east side of Colorado, right?
And then also the impact of I-25. So I-25 is an exciting story. Certainly, it like local migrations need to happen, and a local migration can mean just a deer or an elk moving from one place to another to get water daily. Like there's daily migrations versus seasonal migrations. I-25 definitely stands in the way of daily migrations, and y'all might have also heard in the news. Colorado Department of Transportation has petitioned or has requested funding to do like a ton of overpasses and or I won't say a ton of overpasses, but a ton of retrofitting as they're expanding the highway between Denver and Castle Rock. So hopefully that's moving forward, and that's really exciting. I think the reason that I focus on I-70 is because I-70 has been identified as the biggest barrier to wildlife migrations between Mexico and Canada. Okay, so that's our road is the big, like I think that blew my mind when I heard it. So I think that that's why I focus on that. I hope I answered your question. Thank you. Anybody else?
Yeah, I had the unusual experience living in my house for 30 years. A mama and two cub lynx crossed 10 feet from my back door.
way.
And I'm, you know, it's been 30 years and I've never seen that. How uncommon is that as an experience in this area?
It's very uncommon. And the reason I know that is because few years ago, I was meeting with the Boulder County some Boulder County biologists, and they were the ones that told me that rarely do lynx make their way up here, but they do. Also, lynx and bobcat look super duper similar, and I can give you some tips on identifying them, but it sounds like, sir, there you are. It sounds like you know those tips also. Yeah, the tufts, nailed it. A black tail that looks like it's been dipped in a can of paint. Longer back legs, taller back legs. But yeah, very rare. That's amazing. You were like chosen. I think sir in the blue sweater.
The irrigation ditches in Boulder and the ones that go out east are also commonly used, like bear showing up in Longmont, going along the irrigation ditches.
Yeah, I'm sure the mountain lions are using them too. Yeah, I know Boulder, the city of Boulder has their Greenways program, which I believe, unless I'm mixing something up, is related to the drainage systems also. But the city and the county do a lot of great stuff, and they're definitely already talking about this. And I know that there are corridors within the city that the city is looking at to make sure that they keep open and keep movement happening. And those drainage ditches are, I actually lived in Mapleton Park in the middle of Boulder County, and we had like deer would sleep in like this seasonal drainage ditch. It's great.
What impact has the government shutdown already affected how and what you do, and what happens if it continues?
The question is, has the government shutdown affected what we're doing, and what happens if it continues? So we are not funded by the federal government. So actually the shutdown is not affecting me at all, except for me being a concerned citizen. And then also that's a really big question because so we also work on some policy issues, and there are some proposed regulation changes to the Endangered Species Act out of the Department of the Interior that came up last year. And we are expecting those finalized regulations to come out any day, and they're not good. They're very bad, and I won't get into why because that's, again, another presentation, although I'm happy to talk to anybody about it after this. But So actually, the government shutdown has probably slowed down that regulatory process, which we think is really good. So that's the one good thing that's come out of the shutdown. Yes, over here.
So I was reading a recent study on air quality in Boulder, which I think a lot of people. Air quality in Boulder, a study by the American Lung Society, gave Boulder County a failing air quality grade and rated it the same as Weld County. And I'm, very concerned about us having water and air, but I'm wondering if in your studies, are you seeing the impact of fracking and the other pollutants that humans are doing to the environment on the wildlife? And do you have any ways of measuring that? And
Yeah.
seeing sick animals with cancer, et cetera.
Yeah, so I can't speak to sick animals. I can speak to fracking being a huge detriment to wildlife, especially wildlife movement. So on the West Slope, oil and gas development are huge issues for mule deer. Y'all might know that mule deer are declining in the West generally, but in Colorado as well. It's having a huge impact on mule deer. It's having a huge impact on our greater sage grouse as well as our Gunnison sage grouse. And I mean, I want to say that's going to be as far as my knowledge is how it's affecting. And all, again, those populations are declining. They're moving differently. They're migrating differently. Their mating rituals are changing because of fracking. So, I mean, there's definitely a negative impact. Maybe, I don't know how much time, I want to keep an eye on time.
Hailey, we want to thank you so much for speaking to Rotary today and sharing your knowledge, your experience, and particularly your enthusiasm for this subject. And in honor of you speaking before the club today, we would like to donate 100 doses of polio vaccine to the Rotary Polio Plus campaign, which for the last 26 years has been working to eradicate polio.
Wow, well, thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thanks.